Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress by Dai C.G. Part 2, Chapter 5. Four Eyes had a secret suitcase, which he kept carefully hidden. He was our friend. Remember, we were on our way to see him when we had our encounter with the tailor on the mountain path. The village where Four Eyes was being re-educated was suited lower on the slopes of Phoenix Mountain than ours. Luo and I often went over to his house in the evening to cook a meal if we had managed to lay our hands on a bit of meat, a bottle of local liquor, or some fresh vegetables from the peasants' gardens. We would share our spoils as if we were a gang of three. This made it all the more surprising that he didn't breathe a word to us about his mysterious suitcase. His family lived in the same city as our parents. His father was a writer, his mother a poet. Recently disgraced by the authorities, they had burdened their beloved son with the same dreaded odds as Luo and I faced, the terrible 3 in 1,000. So we were all in the same boat, but Four Eyes, who was 18 years old at the time, lived in almost perpetual fear. In his presence, everything became tinged with danger. At his house, we felt like 3 criminals huddling conspiratorially around the oil lamp. Take the meal, for instance. A knock on the door, while we were wreathed in delicious aromas of some meat dish we had prepared, cooking smells that plunged the 3 of us, famished, into a frenzy of anticipation, was enough to frighten him out of his wits. He would spring to his feet quickly, hide the pan in the corner as if it were contraband, and put out a dish of marinated vegetables, mushy and repulsive, in its stead. Eating meat struck him as a crime typical of the Burgess class to which his family belonged. The day after my performance for the 4 sorceresses, Luo felt a little better. He was well enough to go home, he said, and the little seamstress didn't insist on our staying. I imagined she was exhausted. After breakfast, we set off along the lonely mountain footpath. The damp morning air felt pleasantly refreshing on our flushed faces. Luo smoked as he walked. At first the path descended a little way, then it rose again. When it got steep, I took my sick friend's arm. The ground was soft and wet. The trees intertwined their branches overhead. Passing the village where Four Eyes lived, we spotted him, at work in a paddy field. He was tilling the soil with the aid of a plow and a water buffalo. We could not see the furrows he was making because the thick, fertile bed was flooded with flat water. Bare from the waist up, our friend was making slow progress, for with each step he sank down to his knees in the thick mud, while the black buffalo strained at the plow. The slanting eyes of the early morning sun glinted off his spectacles. The buffalo was of medium size, but boasted an exceptionally long tail, which it swung vigorously from side to side, as though determined to splatter its timid, inexperienced master with as much filth as possible. For all his efforts to dodge the relentless lashes, 1 split second of inattention was enough for Four Eyes to receive a blow to the face from the buffalo's tail, which sent his spectacles hurtling through the air. He swore and dropped the reins from his right hand and the plow from his left. Clapping his hands over his eyes, he let out a stream of abuse, as if he had been blinded. He was so enraged that he didn't hear our jovial shouts of greeting. He was very short-sighted and was unable to distinguish us from the jeering peasants in the neighboring paddy fields. He bent over and plunged his arms into the water, groping around in the mud. The blank expression in his bulging eyes was disconcerting. Four Eyes had evidently aroused his buffalo's sadistic instinct. The creature halted, then heaved from side to side, trampling the muddy bed with vigor, as though intent upon crushing the submerged spectacles with its hooves, or the lurching plowshare. I took off my shoes, rolled up my trousers, and stepped into the paddy field, leaving Luo seated by the wayside. Four Eyes was not eager for me to help search for his spectacles, fearing that I would be a hindrance, but in the end, it was I who stepped on them inadvertently as I groped in the mud. Fortunately, they were still in one piece. His vision restored to its former clarity. Four Eyes was shocked to see the state Luo was in. "You look sick as a dog," he said. As Four Eyes couldn't abandon his work, he suggested we go to his place and take a rest until he returned. He was lodged in the center of the village. He had a few personal belongings, and was so anxious to demonstrate his complete trust in the revolutionary peasants that he never locked his door. The building, an old grain storehouse, was on stilts like ours, but it had a projecting porch supported by sturdy bamboo stakes, where cereals, vegetables, and spices could be spread out to dry. Luo and I settled down on the porch to enjoy the sunshine. After a time, the sun slid behind a mountain peak, and there was a chill in the air. Once the sweat on Luo's body had dried, he turned ice cold. I found an old pullover belonging to Four Eyes and draped it over his back, tying the sleeves around his neck like a scarf. Even though the sun reappeared, he continued to complain of the cold. I went inside again to fetch a quilt from the bed, and on the way there, it occurred to me that there might be another pullover lying around somewhere. I took a look under the bed, where I discovered a large wooden packing crate. Piled on top was a jumble of old shoes and broken slippers encrusted with mud and dirt. Pulling the crate into a beam of dust-dappled sunlight, I opened it and found that it contained more articles of clothing. I was fumbling around in the hope of finding a small pullover that would fit Luo's scrawny body when my fingers suddenly came upon something soft, supple, and smooth to the touch, which made me think at once of a lady's doe-skin shoe. But it wasn't a shoe, it was a suitcase. A ray of light bounced off the glossy lid. It was an elegant suitcase, a little worn, but made of fine leather, and it gave off a whiff of civilization. It seemed inordinately heavy in relation to its size, but I had no way of telling what was inside. It was fastened with locks in 3 places. I waited impatiently for the evening when Four Eyes would be released from his daily struggle with the buffalo, so that I could ask him what sort of treasure he had so securely hidden away in his secret cache. To my surprise, he didn't answer my question. All the time we were cooking, he was unusually quiet, and when he did speak, he took care not to mention the suitcase. While we were eating our supper, I broached the subject again, but still he said nothing. Luo broke the silence. "I expect they're books," he said. "The way you keep your suitcase locked up and hidden away is enough to betray your secret. You've got a stash of forbidden books." A flicker of panic showed in our short-sighted friend's eyes, then vanished behind his glasses as he composed his features into a smiling mask. "He must be dreaming," he said. He reached out to touch Luo's forehead. "Good God, such a fever. That's what's giving you these crazy ideas. It's making you delirious. Listen, we're all friends. We have some good times together, which is fine. But if you go on about such rubbish as forbidden books, damn it, then..." Soon afterwards, Four Eyes brought a brass padlock from one of his neighbors. And from then on, he always took the precaution of securing the door of his house with a chain. 2 weeks later, the broken bowl shards gathered by the little seamstress proved effective, and Luo's malaria subsided. When he removed the bandage from his wrist, he discovered a blister the size of a bird's egg, shiny and transparent.